In today's tightly interconnected global economy, the price tag we see on everyday products rarely reflects the real cost of making them. A €5 t-shirt, a surprisingly cheap smartphone, or a bar of chocolate bought without a second thought seem affordable only because the environmental and social burdens of producing them are carried elsewhere. Much of this cost is absorbed by workers and ecosystems in regions far removed from the consumers who benefit. This uneven geography of harm, where low prices in the global north depend on the global south's inexpensive labor, limited regulatory protections, and fragile environments, raises pressing questions about what responsible consumption truly means. Modern supply chains stretch across continents, linking cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo with assembly lines in China, garment factories in Bangladesh, and cocoa farms in Côte d'Ivoire. Along these chains, the negative impacts of production are repeatedly pushed onto communities with the least economic and political influence. Although consumers in wealthier countries often believe they can make ethical choices simply by selecting the right products, the reality is far more complicated. Low prices are not accidental, rather they are the outcome of decades of global trade reforms, structural adjustment programs, corporate pressure to minimize costs, and a competitive international market that rewards whichever producer can operate at the lowest expense, regardless of the consequences. These structural forces create an economic system in which accountability is spread thin, transparency is limited, and consumers rarely have access to the full story behind the goods they purchase. This distance, both moral and geographical, makes it easier to overlook the human and environmental realities hidden within supply chains. In today's globalized world, the things we buy are never just simple purchases. Every t-shirt, phone, or chocolate bar carries a story that stretches across countries and continents. For many consumers in the global north, shopping feels easy and harmless, but the real cost of producing these goods is often carried by people far away, in places where jobs are insecure and protections are weak. Behind the low prices we enjoy are workers facing longer hours, unsafe conditions, and wages too low to live on, as well as communities dealing with polluted rivers, damaged soil, and disappearing forests. These burdens fall most heavily on the global south, where governments struggle with limited resources, pressure from foreign companies, and the constant need to attract investment. In this imbalance, everyday consumption becomes more than a private choice, rather it becomes a force that shapes lives, environments, and rights across the world. This essay explores who ultimately bears the true cost of cheap consumer goods and what this means for the broader idea of responsible consumption. It argues that the injustices embedded in supply chains are not unfortunate side effects, but predictable results of an economic system designed to prioritize efficiency and profit over fairness and sustainability. Taking examples from fast fashion, electronics manufacturing, and cocoa production, it demonstrates how everyday buying habits shape lives and landscapes thousands of kilometers away. Ultimately, this essay contends that meaningful, responsible consumption cannot rely solely on individual choices. Instead, it requires systemic reforms, stronger corporate accountability, and policy changes. Only through such transformations can global consumption shift from a model based on extraction and inequality to one grounded in justice and shared responsibility. Responsible consumption, as defined by the Global Sustainability Framework such as SDG 12, doesn't merely talk about reducing waste or choosing environment-friendly options, but also lists out the actions which should be taken by the corporations and governments to recognize and address the risks involved in such processes to make consumption ethical. The debate becomes even more complicated because of the huge power gap between the global north and the south. Developed economies have the money, market power, and voting rights to keep demanding cheaper products, while the environmental damage and social costs are pushed onto manufacturing regions like South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and few parts of Latin America. This created an imbalance where consumer demands low prices, companies chase higher profits, and people who manufacture end up bearing the heaviest load. Recognizing this uneven system is essential, and institutions should understand this to ensure better global trade rules.